One of the main reasons I started this channel was so I could cover stories that were either not being really fully explored in the media, or maybe you were getting one extreme view or another, and largely the middle, largely kind of the rational, common sense stuff that impacts everyday workers wasn't really being covered. And what we're going to talk about in today's video is one of those potentially polarizing issues of DE&I. I know it's a spicy topic. I know everyone comes to the table with this with very deeply entrenched feelings about it. But no matter where you sit on this issue, I really hope that you come into today's video with an open mind. You listen all the way through to the end. And more importantly, I want to hear your feedback. This is a channel created for you, for the worker. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. What have your experiences with this been? What are your recommendations on how you can make it better? But we're really all about kind of raising awareness, educating, informing, and sparking debate. So I ask that you walk into it with that attitude and with that heart. And that said, let's jump into it. Hey folks, Mark here with The Rational Workforce. Thanks so much for joining us today. So earlier this week, Yuri Berliner is a longtime reporter for NPR. He penned an article titled, "I've been at NPR for 25 years, and here's how we lost America's trust." Now, it's definitely a provocative title, but the content of the article really backs it up. Now, within the article, Berliner, who self-describes as someone who is Sarah Lawrence educated, raised by a lesbian peace activist mother, drives a Subaru, and has Spotify listening habits that are most similar to people in Berkeley, highlights how NPR has historically had a left-leaning bent, but today represents, in his words, the distilled worldview of a very small segment of the U.S. population. Now, he backs up this claim with examples pointing to two distinct events that essentially broke the newsroom. One is Donald Trump's political ascension, and the other is the prevalence of DEI practices serving as the organization's operational North Star, even over and above the traditional tenets of journalism and impartiality. Now, he cites three specific examples of coverage that reflected these problems. One was the now discredited Russia collusion story. The second was the Hunter Biden laptop story. And the third was surrounding the possibility that COVID's origin was actually a lab leak versus something that came out of the wild in Wuhan. Now, the article then pivots into an exploration of the events that could have caused this shift, this hard break to the left, within an organization of individuals who should have been adhering to journalistic best practices. His assertion that, again, using his own words, America's infestation with systemic racism was declared loud and clear. It was a given. Our mission was to change it. Diversity of our staff and in our audience was the overriding mission, the North Star of the organization. And Berliner then went on to describe how the reporters were required to ask interview subjects for their race, gender, and ethnicity, then enter that information into a centralized tracking system. He said they were given unconscious bias training sessions, and a series of increasingly exclusive affinity groups began to spring up within the organization, including marginalized genders and intersex people of color mentorship program, Mi Gente for Latino employees at NPR, NPR Noir for Black employees at NPR, Southwest Asians and North Africans at NPR, UMA for Muslim identifying employees, women, gender expansive, and transgender people in technology throughout public media. Kaver, I'm probably mispronouncing that, is a Jewish heritage and culture at NPR. And then NPR Pride, which is the LGBTQIA employees at NPR. But these weren't just affinity groups. These weren't just organizations of people that shared common characteristics to get together and to support each other. They held the power to dictate how reporters and presenters covered stories, including what language they used, and it was then codified at the contractual level. Berliner asserts that NPR management was required to keep up to date with current language and style guidance from journalism affinity groups. That was baked right into their contract. Now, shortly after Berliner published his article, NPR penned their own pushback on that, where they stated, NPR's chief news executive, Edith Chapin, wrote in a memo to staff Tuesday afternoon that she and the news leadership team strongly reject Berliner's assessment. We're proud to stand behind the exceptional work that our desks and our shows do to cover a wide range of challenging stories. We believe that inclusion among our staff, with our sourcing, and in our overall coverage is critical to telling the nuanced stories of this country and our world. She added, none of our work is above scrutiny or critique. We must have vigorous discussions on the newsroom about how we serve the public as a whole. Now, although it's great to see that Chapin really feels like we need vigorous debate and the newsroom should be held up to scrutiny, the next sentence, the very next paragraph in the story, proves that maybe her heart isn't really into it, where they wrote, a spokesperson for NPR said Chapin, who also serves as the network's chief content officer, would have no further comment. Okay, so you could be open to rigorous debate, but there'll be no further comment. I don't know how that works. But if this was just happening at NPR, it would be easy to dismiss as maybe a one-off or some sort of isolated case where good intentions and maybe even a tinge of unfounded guilt was able to override common sense, to override journalistic best practices and integrity. But there are other examples of these policies taking over a newsroom. Now, earlier this year, New York Times reporter Adam Rubenstein wrote an article in The Atlantic titled, I Was a Heretic at the New York Times, detailing similar challenges. In the article, Rubenstein wrote about an early ice-breaking session with other staffers where they had to pull a random question out of a hat and answer it in front of colleagues. Rubenstein's question was, what's your favorite sandwich? And he answered, spicy chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A. The response that he got from the group, and more importantly from human resources, was pretty disturbing. He writes, the HR representative leading the orientation chided me. We don't do that here. They hate gay people. People started snapping their fingers in acclamation. I hadn't been thinking about the fact that Chick-fil-A was a transgressive in liberal circles for its chairman's opposition to gay marriage. Not the politics, the chicken, I quickly said, but it was too late. I sat down ashamed. The article also states that any type of content that strayed from kind of the left-leaning orthodoxy that was prevalent in the newsroom got a little extra scrutiny, even if it was shown at all. They wrote, there was a sense that publishing the occasional conservative voice made the paper look centrist, but I soon realized that the conservative voices we published tended to be the ones agreeing with the liberal line. It was also clear that right-of-center submissions were treated differently. They faced a higher bar for entry, more layers of editing, and greater involvement of higher-ups. This all begs a larger question. If these types of programs and these activities were actually undertaken to try to make the workplace more inclusive for everybody, you've got to ask, is this starting to now have the opposite effect? I say that because these concerns aren't just relegated to the newsroom. They're popping up time and again within the workplace that's kind of outside of the media sphere. In January, Newsweek covered a story highlighting how white and Asian job applicants were discriminated against at the University of Washington. Also in January, leaked emails from Dr. Sharita Golden, Chief Diversity Officer at Johns Hopkins Medical School, shared the definition of the word privilege within the context of social justice and the workplace, indicating that privilege is granted to people who have membership in one or more of the following groups: white people, able-bodied, heterosexuals, cisgender people, males, Christians, middle or owning class people, middle-aged people, and English-speaking people. It then goes on to explain how privilege is characteristically invisible to people who have it. So basically, if you belong to any of these groups, if you have pushback on it, if you have questions on it, if you have any concerns and maybe you feel like that doesn't apply to you, by setting up the definition that way, and moreover by highlighting the people that have this privilege, typically don't see it, she's giving anyone who really wants to dismiss people who push back on that idea carte blanche to just be ignored. It goes back even further. In February of 2021, Coca-Cola workers were given an opportunity to take diversity training that urged people to be less white. And what does that entail? Well, according to the training, to be less white is to be less oppressive, less arrogant, less certain, less defensive, less ignorant, more humble, and to break with white solidarity. When this was uncovered, Coca-Cola and LinkedIn, which was the organization that hosted the training, backed down, took it away, but it's there nonetheless. Would these changes have come up, would have been taken away if they weren't called out publicly? Who knows? For many of us, myself included, it seems odd that these programs that are designed to make the workplace more inclusive, to another phrase that's used is bring your whole authentic self to work, If they're designed to really bring people together, why are they creating these programs? Why are they using language that is essentially blocking, turning off, ignoring whole portions of the workplace and by extension, whole portions of their customers? It just seems like common sense that stuff like this could be having a negative impact on workers. As it turns out, it is. Now, according to this infographic from SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resources Management, employees are more likely to filter much of what they say. They're less likely to speak their mind. They're less likely to share their honest thoughts and are less likely to be their authentic selves. Now, SHRM is the preeminent voice in the world of human resources, and human resources people take a lot of flack on this topic and many other ones. But SHRM as an organization is really trying to change the game. They're really out there pushing some different viewpoints that you probably wouldn't expect to come from those HR circles. And they really need to be recognized and commended for it. For example, they're introducing something called 1 Million Civil Conversations, and it's aimed at breaking down these barriers and the hostilities that have built up over the years and create an environment where questions can be asked, where opinions can be shared, and where workers can be understood no matter what their background is. This is a really good step in the right direction, and fortunately, they're not alone. Other leaders, like Steve Pemberton from the Lighthouse Academy, are taking a more pragmatic approach to addressing these issues too. Pemberton recently wrote an article for Business Insider titled "We're Doing DEI Wrong," in which he highlighted the challenges he's personally faced as a mixed-race person and how diversity is not only a nice-to-have for employers, but is a prerequisite for success. He highlights how he's created programs that have opened up new opportunities to handicapped individuals, a category of worker that is really all but ignored by mainstream DEI policies. And more importantly, how companies need to have voices and perspectives that represent the totality of their target audience. This is a huge, critical, important point that we really need to drive home. And I feel like so many employers miss the mark on this front. Too many employers look at diversity through very narrow lenses of skin color or gender or country of origin, and that's it. Topics like neurodiversity, which is another huge issue that needs to be tackled, or ideological diversity. Ideological diversity and diversity of thought is pretty much vilified in a lot of these programs. But then you've got your vast majority of rank and file workers who just want to show up, put in a good day's work, take home a paycheck and provide for their families, and then leave the political and the ideological stuff out of the workplace. They're often forced into a position where they either have to shut up and get along or take a stand, and it better be the right stand. We've got to do something about this. What's happening is an extension of the "you're either with us or against us" mindset that's been able to flourish because employers have largely taken away the opportunity for open dialogue. They've taken away the opportunity for people to ask questions, to share their own perspectives, and more importantly, to have people understand and respect those perspectives, even if they don't agree with them. The simple fact of the matter is, for employers, they need to have diverse viewpoints, often conflicting viewpoints, if they want to move forward in any meaningful way. If you surround yourselves, if you make up your employee base entirely of people who look like you, think like you, worship like you, have the same beliefs, vote like you do, you create this ideological bubble, and you don't let any other thoughts and any other viewpoints and any other perspectives in, and that is incredibly bad for business. That bubble makes you more and more isolated, and it digs the trenches of division even deeper. We're at a place where even if you believe in DEI, even if you believe that need for diversity within a workplace, if you push back on it in its current state, you're instantly labeled with homophobe or xenophobe or misogynistic or any other ist or ism that could be potentially career-ending just for asking questions, just for maybe not going along with everything that's being pushed out in the business. It's often a bullying tactic that's used to stifle dissent and make sure that people stay in their place. And oftentimes, companies are introducing policies and programs that give teeth to those assertions, that really put the onus of potentially losing your job even for just asking a question. It's a real concern out there. Now, the other side of that coin, if you go out in some circles and you highlight, yes, diversity is important. Of course you want to have a diverse workplace and diverse messages if you want to sell to a diverse audience. But if you take that viewpoint, they'll tag you as a lefty or woke or a commie, and it's just digging a trench deeper, but for a different camp. Both approaches are wrong, and we need to course correct, and we better do it quickly. Each quarter, Gallup puts out a report where they take a look at employee engagement, how much employees are actively dialed into their work. And the ones that just came in for Q1 of 2024 are some of the worst they've ever seen. People are unplugging, they're disengaging, they no longer want to be part of the workplace. And you've got to think there could be a correlation between the rise of these types of attitudes in these programs and the continuing decline of engagement within the workplace. So my question to you is, if you're an employer or a manager or an executive or you're an HR leadership position, what are you going to do? What approach are you going to take? Are you going to look at the evidence? Are you going to admit that maybe some changes need to be made? And then are you going to take proactive steps to creating those changes within your workplace so we can get things back on track? Or are you just going to whistle past the graveyard and just keep the same policies in place or double down on it and maybe try rebranding DEI to something different, hoping that maybe employees will see it differently and have a fresh new attitude towards it? I don't know. There are plenty of examples from the world of entertainment and the world of consumer products that showcase how if you take these stances that alienate big chunks of your customer base or vilify certain groups of people who also happen to be not just employees, but also customers, it leads to very, very bad results for your business, both in top line and bottom line. So where we go forward from here, well, the choice is ultimately yours. So that's what I have to say on the matter. I care much more about what you have to say on the matter. Please take a few minutes out, leave some notes in the comments section below, reach out to me. I would love to hear what you have to say about this important topic, and let's get to a point where we can at least talk about it, where we can put it out on the table, we can have discussions, we can challenge each other's beliefs, and do it in a place where we're just not slinging mud at each other, because the trenches have been dug, the battle lines have been drawn, and we need to take a deep cleansing breath and back down out of this, because we got to work, we got to get together at work, and we got to just keep moving things forward. Also, if you like what you saw, please click subscribe, ring the bell, give us a thumbs up. Do all the things to indicate that this is a channel that matters to you and that you'd like to see more and you'd like to keep it growing. Most of all, I want to thank you for sticking around throughout this entire video and watching it with an open mind and an open heart and taking it in the spirit in which it was intended, which was to create a forum, to inject some alternate viewpoints, and to really help us get to a place where we can understand different sides of the issue and figure out collectively where we can go from there with it. It means the world to me, and I hope I see you on the next video. Thanks for tuning in.